In the harsh year of 1880, where the American frontier still carved deep lines into both the land and the souls of those who dared to call it home, there existed stories that newspapers would never print. Stories of women who learned to survive not through the strength of their backs, but through the quiet resilience of their hearts. This is one such story, set in a forgotten corner of Kansas, where the wind carries more secrets than the weekly mail, and where two broken souls would find in each other what the world had tried to take away. If stories of healing, courage, and chosen love move you, subscribe now. Here, every chapter is a home for those who believe love is stronger than pain. Picture, if you will, a place where time moves differently, where the church bell marks not just the hours, but the rhythm of an entire community's heartbeat, where letters arrive weeks late, carrying news that has already changed the world somewhere else. It's here, in this dusty village that maps barely acknowledge, that Eleanor Whitmore has learned to live with ghosts. But sometimes, just sometimes, salvation comes in the most unexpected form, barefoot, in a dirty dress, with eyes that have seen too much for their tender years. Eleanor Whitmore's hands had forgotten gentleness. At 42, they bore the calluses of a woman doing men's work alone. She stood at her kitchen window, one of the few she occasionally opened, watching the morning sun paint the Kansas plains gold, just as it had every day for 3 years since she'd stopped caring about time. The Whitmore ranch sat like a scar on the landscape, its paint peeling, fences sagging with neglect. Once, it had been Millbrook Township's pride. Now it stood as a monument to everything Eleanor had learned to live without. The townspeople had stopped visiting 2 winters ago. Mrs. Henderson from the general store still left supplies every Tuesday, but no longer knocked. Eleanor preferred it that way. She was stirring her morning coffee, black, always black, when she heard bare feet on wooden steps. Then, impossibly gentle, a knock that seemed to apologize for existing. Eleanor's hand froze. No one came anymore. When she opened the door, Eleanor saw something that stopped her breath. A girl, perhaps 8, stood on her porch like a question mark. Her dress was once blue but had faded to old bruises, torn and stained with travel and tears. Her feet were bare, dusty, cut from long walks over rough ground. But her eyes stopped Eleanor's breath, dark as prairie storms, old as earth itself, holding weight no child should carry. "Ma'am," the girl said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I so wish I had a mother." And then, with a movement so natural it seemed choreographed by angels, the child reached out and placed her small, warm hand over Eleanor's weathered one. Eleanor felt something crack inside her chest, not breaking, but opening, like ice giving way to spring. For the first time in 3 years, Eleanor Whitmore remembered what it felt like to be needed. "What's your name, child?" "Lily, ma'am." Lily rose. The girl's eyes searched Eleanor's face desperately. "I heard in town that you might understand about being alone." Eleanor's throat tightened. Of course people talked. "Where are your people?" Lily rose. The girl's expression flickered like a candle in wind. "Don't have any, ma'am. Been walking for a while now." Eleanor knew she should ask more questions, but something in Lily's eyes warned against pressing too hard. She recognized that look. The careful guard of someone who had learned trust was a luxury they couldn't afford. Instead, Eleanor stepped back. "You hungry?" Lily's face transformed, the careful mask slipping to reveal desperate hope. "Yes, ma'am. Very much so." Eleanor heated leftover biscuits and poured milk. She watched Lily eat with focused intensity, someone who had learned not to waste food, not to take any meal for granted. "How long since you've had a proper meal?" Lily paused mid-bite, calculating. 3 days, I think. Maybe 4. Time gets fuzzy when you're walking. Eleanor's chest tightened. "And where were you walking to?" "Here," Lily said simply. "I heard people talking about the sad lady who lives alone in the big house. They said you lost your family too." The words hit Eleanor like a physical blow. "Who told you that?" "People talk, ma'am. They say you had a husband who went to war and a little boy who got sick." Lily's voice was gentle, careful. "I thought maybe you'd understand what it's like to have empty places inside you." Eleanor stared at this strange child who spoke with wisdom beyond her years, who had somehow found her way to Eleanor's door carrying nothing but hope and heartbreak. "Lily, are you running from something?" The girl's hand stilled. For a moment, only the clock's tick filled the silence. Maybe, Lily whispered. But I'm also running to something. I hope. Eleanor looked at this impossible, brave, heartbreaking child and felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 years. The stirring of purpose. Well then, Eleanor said, her voice stronger than it had been in months, I suppose you'd better stay for lunch too. 3 days passed like pages turning in a well-loved book. Eleanor found herself moving differently, no longer walking around empty spaces, but filling them with the careful choreography of caring for another person. Lily had claimed the small room upstairs, Samuel's room, though Eleanor couldn't say it aloud. The girl had stood in the doorway that first evening, looking at the bed with its patchwork quilt, the wooden toy still on the shelf, and had simply said, "He must have been a good boy, ma'am. You can tell by how the room still feels loved." Now, Eleanor watched from the kitchen window as Lily fed scraps to the wild chickens behind the house. The girl moved with careful deliberation, speaking softly to the birds as if they were old friends. "She's got away with them," Eleanor murmured to herself, then startled at the sound of her own voice. She'd been talking to herself more these past few days, breaking the silence that had become as oppressive as summer heat. "Mrs. Whitmore." Lily's voice carried across the yard. "These chickens are awful skinny. When's the last time they had proper feed?" Eleanor felt heat rise in her cheeks. The truth was, she'd barely been maintaining the ranch, keeping only what she needed to survive. The chickens, the garden, the fences, they'd all been left to fend for themselves while she'd fended off her own demons. "I'll ride into town tomorrow," Eleanor called back. "Get some proper feed from Henderson's." The lie came easily. She hadn't been to town in 6 months, hadn't faced the pitying looks and careful conversations of people who didn't know what to do with a woman who'd lost everything that mattered. But as she watched Lily coax a particularly skittish hen to eat from her palm, Eleanor realized she might have found something worth facing those looks for. That evening, they sat by the fireplace Eleanor had lit for the first time since last winter. Lily perched on Samuel's old chair, working on mending her dress with needle and thread Eleanor had provided. "Where did you learn to sew like that?" Lily's hands paused briefly. "My mama taught me before she took sick. She said a lady should know how to make do, how to take care of things." "Your mama sounds wise." "She was." Lily's voice was distant. "She used to say that love wasn't just in the big gestures. She said it was in the small things. Mending clothes so someone stays warm, making sure the animals are fed, listening when someone needs to talk." Eleanor felt her throat tighten. "She sounds like my Thomas. He used to say that taking care of each other was the most important work anyone could do." They sewed in comfortable silence, the only sounds the fire's crackle and thread through fabric. Eleanor found herself stealing glances at Lily, noting the careful way the girl worked, the small frown of concentration. "Mrs. Whitmore," Lily said suddenly. "Yes, child. Why did you stop taking care of things after your family left?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Eleanor set down her sewing, hands suddenly unsteady. "I suppose I thought there wasn't any point. No one left to take care of. No one who needed me." Lily looked up from her mending, dark eyes serious. "But the chickens needed you. And the garden. And maybe other people who might come along." Eleanor met the girl's gaze, saw the careful hope there, the gentle challenge. "People like you. People like me," Lily agreed softly. The next morning, Eleanor stood before her wardrobe, actually considering which dress to wear to town. She settled on her blue calico and braided her hair with more care than she'd taken in months. "You look nice, Mrs. Whitmore," Lily said, dividing eggs between 2 plates. "Like you're ready for an adventure." Eleanor felt her cheeks warm. "It's just town, child. Sometimes the biggest adventures happen in ordinary places," Lily said solemnly. The ride to Millbrook took 20 minutes. Lily sat beside her, eyes wide as they passed familiar landmarks. Eleanor felt the girl's presence like an anchor, grounding her to the present instead of painful memories. Millbrook hadn't changed. The same cluster of buildings around the main street. Eleanor pulled up to Henderson's general store, her heart beating faster than expected. "Mrs. Whitmore." Lily's voice was gentle. "Are you all right?" Eleanor's hands gripped the reins tightly. It's been a while since I've been around people. Lily placed her small hand over Eleanor's. Would it help if I went in with you? Eleanor looked at this wise child who had appeared like an answer to unspoken prayers. Yes, I think it would help very much. The bell chimed as they entered. Margaret Henderson looked up with practiced shopkeeper's smile, which faltered when she saw Eleanor. Eleanor Whitmore. Margaret's voice carried surprise. My goodness, it's been 6 months. I know it's been a while, Margaret. Margaret's eyes shifted to Lily with obvious curiosity. And who might this young lady be? Eleanor felt Lily's hand slip into hers. This is Lily Rose. She's staying with me. Staying with you. Margaret's eyebrows climbed. Why, that's wonderful, Eleanor. Just wonderful. Something in Margaret's voice, genuine warmth beneath surprise, reminded Eleanor why she had once considered this woman a friend. As they gathered supplies, Eleanor found herself engaging in conversation for the first time in months. Margaret asked gentle questions, and Eleanor answered honestly. It's good to see you out again, Margaret said, tallying purchases. The town's missed you, Eleanor. Eleanor felt unexpected emotion tighten her throat. Thank you, Margaret. That means more than you know. Loading supplies into the wagon, Lily tugged Eleanor's sleeve. Mrs. Henderson seems nice. She is. She and her husband were good friends to Thomas and me. I just wasn't ready to see people for a while. But you're ready now. Eleanor looked at Lily's upturned face, at the hope and trust there, and realized something profound had shifted. Yes, I think I'm ready now. The ride home felt different. Eleanor felt lighter, as if she'd set down a burden she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. Lily chattered about the store, other customers, how Mrs. Henderson had smiled at her manners. Mrs. Whitmore. Lily said as they turned up the lane. Yes, child. Thank you for taking me today. It felt like we were a family, doing errands together. Eleanor's hand stilled on the reins. Family. The word awakened chambers in her heart she'd thought sealed forever. Lily, what exactly are you hoping for? Staying here with me. Lily was quiet for so long Eleanor thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was small but clear. I guess I'm hoping we could take care of each other. Like your mama and Thomas taught you. Like my mama taught me. Maybe we could be each other's family. Eleanor pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to look at this remarkable child. Lily Rose, Eleanor said solemnly. I think that might be exactly what we both need. 2 weeks later, Eleanor's house had begun to feel like a home again. Lily's presence filled spaces that grief had hollowed out, creating something new and precious. This morning found Eleanor teaching Lily to make biscuits. The girl's hands were dusted with flour, tongue poking out in concentration. Not too much, Eleanor cautioned. Handle it just enough to bring it together. Too much kneading makes them tough. Like people. Lily asked with unconscious wisdom. Eleanor paused, struck by the observation. Yes, I suppose like people. Sometimes the gentlest touch works best. They were sliding biscuits into the oven when Eleanor heard it. Thunder of approaching horses. Too fast and too many for a casual visit. Through the window, she saw dust rising, and her stomach clenched. Lily, Eleanor said carefully, go upstairs to your room. Stay there until I call. The girl's head snapped up, shifting from contentment to wariness instantly. What's wrong? Probably nothing. Just go upstairs. Please. Lily hesitated, then nodded and slipped away with quiet efficiency Eleanor had noticed before. How the girl could make herself nearly invisible when needed. Eleanor wiped her hands and stepped onto the porch, squinting against morning sun. 3 riders approached, horses lathered with sweat and dust. Hard men with unpleasant expressions. The lead rider was tall and lean, with graying hair beneath a black hat and winter sky eyes. He touched his hat brim in a gesture that might have been polite if not for the coldness. Ma'am. Name's Caleb Morrison. We're looking for a girl, about 8, dark hair, traveling alone. We believe she came this way. Eleanor's heart hammered, but she kept her expression neutral. What business would you have with a child? Morrison's smile was thin, didn't reach his eyes. The girl ran away from her legal guardian. We've been hired to bring her back where she belongs. Legal guardian? Her uncle. The stockier man called Hayes spoke up aggressively. Girl's been trouble since her parents died. Running off, causing problems. Eleanor studied the three men, noting how their eyes constantly moved, assessing. These weren't men on a rescue mission. These were hunters. I'm afraid I can't help you, Eleanor said firmly. I haven't seen any children traveling alone. Morrison's eyes narrowed. You sure? We tracked her this far. Your place is the only one for miles. I'm certain. Now, I'd appreciate it if you'd move along. Bennett, who had remained silent, spoke softly but menacingly. Ma'am, we're not leaving empty-handed. That girl is worth a lot of money to us. Eleanor felt ice form in her stomach. Money? Morrison leaned forward. $500. Her uncle's offering generous reward for her safe return. If you're hiding her, it'd be best to hand her over peaceful-like. Eleanor's mind raced. $500 was more than most people saw in 2 years. No uncle would offer that unless... What did she do? Hayes laughed like grinding gravel. Smart woman. Little girl witnessed something she shouldn't have. Her uncle just wants her properly looked after. The implication hung like poison. Eleanor felt sick but forced herself calm. Even if I had seen such a child, I wouldn't hand her over without proper legal documentation. A sheriff's warrant, perhaps. Morrison's politeness cracked. Listen here, lady. We've been tracking that brat for 2 weeks across 3 states. We're tired, hungry, and running out of patience. You can make this easy or hard, but we're not leaving without her. Eleanor stepped toward her door, hand moving to the rifle propped inside. And I'm telling you she's not here. Now get off my property. The men exchanged glances, reaching silent agreement. Morrison smiled, purely predatory. Tell you what, we'll just look around. Make sure we haven't missed anything. You will not, Eleanor said firmly, hand closing on the rifle. This is private property. Hayes started to dismount, but Morrison stopped him. Mrs. Whitmore. Mrs. Whitmore. You're a widow, living alone. Dangerous country. All sorts of accidents can happen to lone women. The threat was clear. Eleanor felt fear spike through anger, but thought of Lily upstairs, depending on her protection. Mr. Morrison, Eleanor said quietly, I suggest you move along before I decide you're trespassing and act accordingly. Morrison studied her, then nodded to his companions. We'll be back, Mrs. Whitmore. Next time, we might not be so polite. As the men rode away, Eleanor remained on the porch until their dust disappeared. Only then did she allow herself to shake. Mrs. Whitmore. Lily's voice was small, frightened. Eleanor turned to see the girl in the doorway, face pale. How much did you hear? All of it. They're not taking me back to Uncle Silas, are they? Eleanor's heart broke at the terror in the girl's voice. No, Lily. They're not taking you anywhere. But they said they'd be back. 3 of them and only one of you. Eleanor knelt and took Lily's cold, small hands. Lily rose. Look at me. The girl raised her eyes, desperate hope warring with expected disappointment. I don't know what your Uncle Silas did, and I don't know what you saw, Eleanor said gently. But I know you're a good child, and you don't deserve whatever those men want. As long as you're in my house, under my protection, no one will hurt you. Understand? Lily nodded, tears spilling. But you don't know what kind of man Uncle Silas is. I don't want him to hurt you because of me. Eleanor pulled the girl into her arms, feeling how small and fragile she was, how much courage it must have taken to run. Lily, Eleanor said fiercely, you are not going back. I don't care what it takes. You're my family now, and I protect my family. If that moment gave you chills too, hit the like button and comment. Family is who stays. We want to hear what this scene meant to you. As she held the trembling child, Eleanor felt something harden inside, determination she hadn't felt since Thomas went to war. She had failed to protect her husband and son, but she would not fail Lily, even if it cost her everything. That evening, Eleanor sat with Lily by the fireplace and finally heard the whole story. Lily's parents had died in cholera 2 years ago. She'd been sent to live with her father's brother, Silas Parker, in a rough Colorado mining town. Uncle Silas ran a saloon and gambling hall, and Lily had been expected to work, cleaning, serving drinks to men who looked at her wrong, staying invisible. But one night, Lily said, voice hollow with memory, "I couldn't sleep because of noise downstairs. I went to listen, and I saw Uncle Silas and two men dragging something out the back door, something wrapped in a blanket." Eleanor's blood ran cold. Someone, Lily whispered. The next morning, there was a traveling merchant who was supposed to leave that day, but Uncle Silas said he'd change his mind and left in the night. But I saw his belongings still in his room, and I saw blood on Uncle Silas's hands. Eleanor felt sick. "Oh, Lily." I tried to pretend I hadn't seen anything, but Uncle Silas knew. He started watching me constantly. Then one day, he said he'd found a nice family in California who wanted to adopt me. But I heard him talking to those men, the same ones who were here today. He wasn't sending me to a family. He was selling me. Eleanor's arms tightened around the girl. The full horror hit her. Lily hadn't just run from an unkind guardian. She'd escaped from a murderer willing to sell his own niece to hide his crime. "So I ran," Lily continued. "I took what little money I could find and ran. I've been traveling for weeks, staying away from main roads, sleeping in barns. I thought if I could get far enough away, find someone who might want me." "And you found me," Eleanor said softly. "I found you. And for the first time since Mama and Papa died, I felt safe. I felt loved." Eleanor looked at this brave, broken child who had survived horrors that would destroy many adults, and felt her heart expand with fierce, protective love. "You are loved," Eleanor said firmly. "And you are safe. Whatever it takes," Lily rose. "You're staying right here with me." But even as she made the promise, Eleanor knew Morrison and his men would return, and when they came, she would need to be ready for a fight that would determine both their lives. Eleanor didn't sleep that night. She sat in the rocking chair by Lily's bedside, rifle across her knees, listening to every sound the old house made. Near dawn, she heard what she'd been dreading, horses approaching quietly. She peered through the curtain and saw them, Morrison and his companions, plus 2 additional men, all dismounting near the tree line. Eleanor's heart hammered, but her hands were steady as she gently shook Lily awake. "They're back," she whispered. Lily's eyes flew open, instantly alert. 5 of them this time. Eleanor continued quietly. "They're trying to surround the house." Eleanor had spent the sleepless night planning. "There's a root cellar behind the kitchen pantry, hidden under loose floorboard. Thomas built it during the war. You're going to hide there." "What about you?" "I'm going to convince them you're not here." Lily grabbed Eleanor's hand. "They'll hurt you if they think you're lying." Eleanor met the girl's eyes. Lily rose. "Do you trust me?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then go to that cellar and stay there no matter what you hear. Promise me." Lily nodded reluctantly, and Eleanor led her quickly downstairs. The hidden cellar was small but dry, with space for one person and supplies Thomas had stored years ago. Eleanor helped Lily down and replaced the floorboard, just as heavy footsteps sounded on the front porch. This time, Morrison didn't bother with politeness. The front door shook under his fist. "Mrs. Whitmore, open up. We know she's in there." Eleanor took a deep breath and opened the door, rifle visible in her hands. "I told you yesterday, she's not here." Morrison pushed past her without invitation, his men spreading out behind him. Eleanor noticed they all wore guns now, faces carrying hard determination of men who had decided to stop pretending at civility. "Search the house," Morrison ordered. "Check every room, every closet, every place a child could hide." "This is illegal," Eleanor said, though she knew the words were useless. "Nothing's illegal if there's no one left to report it," Hayes said with an ugly grin. Eleanor's blood turned to ice, but she forced herself calm. "People in town know I exist. Mrs. Henderson expects me weekly now. If something happens to me—" "Accidents happen," Morrison said conversationally as his men ransacked Eleanor's home, especially to women living alone. "Fires, falls, wild animals. Tragic, really." The sounds of her house being torn apart Furniture overturned, belongings scattered, nearly broke Eleanor's resolve. But she thought of Lily, hidden beneath the kitchen floor, depending on Eleanor's strength. After 20 minutes, the men reconvened. Morrison's face was dark with frustration. "She's not here," Bennett reported. Morrison studied Eleanor with calculating eyes. "Where is she?" "I told you, I haven't seen any." Morrison's hand cracked across Eleanor's face with shocking speed. She stumbled backward, tasting blood, her rifle clattering to the floor. "Don't lie to me," Morrison snarled. "We know she came this direction. Where is she?" Eleanor wiped blood from her split lip, eyes blazing with anger. "I don't know what child you're talking about." This time Hayes hit her, his fist connecting with her stomach. Eleanor gasped, fighting not to cry out. "Maybe she moved on," Hayes suggested. "No," Morrison said firmly. "The tracks end here. She's here somewhere, or this woman knows where she went." He grabbed Eleanor by the shoulders, fingers digging into her flesh. "Last chance, lady. Where is she?" Eleanor met his gaze with steel in her own. "Go to hell." Morrison's eyes flashed with rage, and Eleanor saw his hand move toward his gun. This was it, the moment when everything would be decided. But then, cutting through the tension like a church bell on Sunday morning, came the sound of approaching horses. Multiple riders, moving fast and making no attempt at stealth. Morrison froze, his hand on his weapon. Through the broken window, Eleanor could see dust rising from the main road. A lot of dust, more than 5 riders could make. "Boss," Bennett said nervously, "that looks like—" "Shut up," Morrison hissed, but Eleanor could see fear creeping into his expression. The riders came into view. Sheriff Tom Bradley from Millbrook, riding hard with what looked like half the men from town. Eleanor recognized Bill Henderson, Doc Matthews, even old Pastor Williams, all armed and looking grimmer than she'd ever seen them. "Well, I'll be damned," Eleanor breathed. Morrison's facade cracked completely. "How did they?" "Because people in small towns look out for each other," Eleanor said, understanding flooding through her. "Especially when someone they care about might be in trouble." The truth was simpler than Morrison could have imagined. Margaret Henderson had noticed Eleanor's absence from her usual weekly visit and had sent her oldest boy to check on her. When he'd reported seeing strange men watching the Whitmore ranch from the tree line, Margaret had done what any sensible woman in Kansas did when trouble threatened. She'd alerted the sheriff and rallied the community. Sheriff Bradley's voice boomed across the yard. "This is Sheriff Bradley. Come out with your hands visible." Morrison cursed viciously, his plans collapsing around him. Eleanor saw him calculating odds, weighing options, his hand still hovering near his gun. "It's over, Morrison," Eleanor said quietly. "You're outnumbered, outgunned, and out of luck." For a moment, Morrison's face twisted with rage, and Eleanor thought he might try to shoot her out of spite. But then Bennett grabbed his arm. "Boss, we need to go. Now." The reality of their situation finally penetrated Morrison's anger. 5 wanted men against a sheriff's posse in broad daylight was not a fight they could win. "This isn't over," Morrison snarled at Eleanor. "That girl's worth too much money to just walk away from." "Yes, it is," Eleanor replied calmly. "Because now the law knows about you. Now people are watching. And if anything happens to me or Lily, there will be witnesses and consequences." Morrison stared at her for a long moment, then jerked his head toward the back door. "Move," he ordered his men. As the 5 men slipped out the rear of the house, Eleanor heard Sheriff Bradley calling her name. She made her way to the front door on unsteady legs, her face bruised and her dress torn, but her spirit unbroken. "Eleanor." Sheriff Bradley dismounted quickly, his weathered face creased with concern. "Are you hurt? We saw those men." "I'm all right, Tom," Eleanor managed, though her voice shook slightly. "Thank you for coming. Margaret was worried when you didn't show up at the store. Said it wasn't like you to miss your weekly visit." The sheriff studied her battered face with professional concern. "Who were those men?" Eleanor took a breath, knowing that the next few minutes would determine everything. "They were looking for a child. A little girl." "What child?" "Sheriff," Eleanor said carefully. What I'm about to tell you needs to stay between us until we can figure out the best way to handle it. Can I trust you with that? Tom Bradley had known Eleanor since she was a girl herself. He'd stood at Thomas's funeral, helped carry Samuel's small coffin. If she said she needed discretion, he'd give it to her. You have my word, Eleanor. Lily, Eleanor called softly. It's safe now, child. Come out. The other men watched in amazement as a section of the kitchen floor seemed to lift by itself, revealing a hidden space beneath. Lily's pale face appeared, followed by the rest of her small form as Eleanor helped her up from the cellar. This is Lily Rose, Eleanor said, her arm protectively around the girl's shoulders. And she's in very serious trouble. Over the next hour, with Lily sitting close beside her and Sheriff Bradley taking careful notes, Eleanor told the story, all of it. Uncle Silas and the murder Lily had witnessed. The attempted sale of a child to cover up a crime. The weeks of desperate flight across 3 states. The men who had just fled, hired to bring back a witness who could destroy a killer. When she finished, the assembled men sat in stunned silence. Jesus, Sheriff Bradley finally breathed. Eleanor, you could have been killed. So could she, Eleanor replied, her hand finding Lily's. And she's just a child. Pastor Williams, a gentle man who rarely spoke harshly of anyone, cleared his throat. What kind of monster sells his own niece to hide murder? The kind that won't stop coming, Bill Henderson said grimly. $500 is serious money. They'll be back. Eleanor felt Lily's small hand tighten in hers, and saw fear flicker across the girl's face again. No, Eleanor said firmly. They won't be back. Because Lily isn't going anywhere. Sheriff Bradley looked up from his notes. Eleanor, you can't just decide to keep her. There are legal procedures, courts, proper channels. Tom, Eleanor interrupted. What courts? What proper channels? You think I'm going to hand this child over to some judge who might decide to send her back to Colorado, back to a man who murders for money? But Eleanor, she's my family now, Eleanor said with quiet finality. I'm adopting her, legal and proper, and anyone who wants to take her away from me is going to have to go through me first. Lily looked up at Eleanor with wonder and hope shining in her dark eyes. Really? You really want to be my mama? Eleanor's throat closed with emotion. She thought of Thomas, who had dreamed of a house full of children. She thought of Samuel, who would have loved having a little sister. She thought of all the love she believed was buried with her family, now flowing toward this brave, broken child who had walked into her life asking for nothing more than someone to care. Yes, Lily Rose, Eleanor said softly. I really want to be your mama. The tears that had been threatening all morning finally came. Not tears of grief this time, but tears of joy. Eleanor pulled Lily into her arms, holding her close, feeling her heart expand to make room for new love alongside the old. Sheriff Bradley cleared his throat roughly. Well then, I suppose we'll need to talk about making that legal. And we'll need to send word to the authorities in Colorado about this Silas Parker. What about those men? Doc Matthews asked. They threatened Eleanor. They'll likely try again. Eleanor looked around at the faces of her neighbors, people who had known her since childhood, who had mourned with her in loss and now rejoiced with her in this unexpected blessing. Let them try, Eleanor said with quiet confidence. They're not dealing with one isolated woman anymore. They're dealing with a community, a family. Bill Henderson nodded firmly. Damn right. Anyone who wants to hurt Eleanor or little Lily here will have to answer to all of us. The other men murmured agreement, and Eleanor felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the sense of belonging to something larger than her own grief. As the men prepared to leave, after helping Eleanor right her overturned furniture and secure her damaged door, Sheriff Bradley pulled her aside. Eleanor, are you sure about this? Adopting the girl, I mean. It's a big responsibility, especially for someone who's been alone for so long. Eleanor looked through the kitchen window, where Lily was already back at work feeding the chickens, talking softly to the birds as if nothing traumatic had happened. The girl's resilience amazed her, but so did her capacity for simple joy in small things. Tom, Eleanor said quietly, for 3 years I've been living like I was already dead. going through the motions, but not really living. That little girl walked up to my door and asked for nothing more than someone to love her, and in doing that, she saved my life as much as I saved hers. And if Morrison comes back, if there are more men like him. Eleanor's expression hardened. Then they'll learn that a woman protecting her child is the most dangerous creature on God's earth. That evening, as Eleanor tucked Lily into bed, the girl looked up at her with solemn eyes. "Mama Eleanor," she said tentatively, testing the words. Eleanor's heart swelled. "Yes, baby." "Are you scared?" "About the men, I mean. About them maybe coming back." Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing Lily's dark hair away from her face. "A little scared, yes, but not enough to change my mind about anything." "Good," Lily said with satisfaction, "because I don't want to run anymore. I want to stay here with you and be a family." "That's exactly what we're going to do," Eleanor promised. "We're going to be a family. We're going to take care of each other and the ranch and the chickens. We're going to go to town every week and have Sunday dinners and Christmas mornings. We're going to have the life we both thought we'd lost forever." Lily smiled, the first truly carefree smile Eleanor had seen from her. "Will you teach me how to really take care of the chickens? And maybe how to ride a horse?" Eleanor laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. "I'll teach you everything I know," Lily rose. "And maybe you can teach me a few things too." "Like what?" Eleanor thought about it seriously. "Like how to hope again. Like how to believe that good things can still happen, even after bad things have tried to break you. Like how love can find you when you least expect it." Lily reached up and hugged Eleanor tight. "I love you, Mama Eleanor." Eleanor closed her eyes, feeling the words heal places in her heart she'd thought would never stop aching. "I love you too, my sweet girl. More than you'll ever know." As Eleanor blew out the lamp and settled into the rocking chair for another night of protective watching, she reflected on how much had changed since that morning 2 weeks ago when a barefoot girl had appeared on her porch. She had been a woman hollowed out by loss, living in a house full of ghosts. Now she was a mother again, with a future to protect and nurture. The grief for Thomas and Samuel would never fully leave her, but it no longer defined her entire existence. Outside, the Kansas wind whispered through the prairie grass, carrying with it the promise of changing seasons and new beginnings. Eleanor listened to Lily's steady breathing, to the familiar sounds of her home settling around them, and felt something she had almost forgotten: peace. Morrison and his men might try to return, and there would be legal battles ahead to make Lily's adoption official. There would be challenges and struggles, setbacks and sorrows, but there would also be Christmas mornings and first days of school, scraped knees to bandage and bedtime stories to tell. Most importantly, there would be love, the chosen kind, the kind that says, "You belong with me," to a broken child, and "You are enough," to a grieving woman. Eleanor had learned something profound in these past weeks. Family isn't just about blood and birth. Sometimes it's about recognizing a kindred spirit in someone who needs exactly what you have to give, and who gives exactly what you need in return. As the moon rose over the Kansas plains, Eleanor Whitmore sat watching over her daughter, not the child of her body, but the child of her heart, and knew that sometimes the most important journeys begin with the simple courage to answer an unexpected knock at the door. Sometimes salvation comes barefoot in a dirty dress, carrying nothing but hope and the desperate wish for someone to love. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you have just enough broken pieces left in your heart to build something beautiful with someone else's broken pieces. In the morning, there would be breakfast to make and chores to do and a life to live. But tonight, there was simply this: the quiet contentment of a woman who had learned to be a mother again, and a child who had learned what it meant to be truly home. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who believes in second chances. And tell us in the comments, who was your Eleanor? Or your Lily? Outside the window, the Kansas stars watched over them both, bearing witness to the kind of love that transforms ordinary houses into sanctuaries and turns strangers into family, with nothing more than the willingness to care for each other's broken places. And in a small ranch house where grief had once echoed in empty rooms, the sound of two hearts healing together was the sweetest music the prairie had heard in years. Here on this channel, we tell stories like this one, real, moving, transformative. If you want more, turn on the notification bell and come along with us.